What's up, guys? I'm Brendan Schaub. If you love everything mixed martial arts, I'm talking UFC breakdowns, UFC picks, one championship picks, Bellator, PFL, you name it, your boy breaks it all down. Tune into The Schaub Show, available every Monday wherever you listen to your podcasts. The Schaub Show. Enjoy.
When a person goes missing, their loved ones often find themselves overcome with worry and grief. Bruce Maitland started the 501c3 nonprofit organization Private Investigations for the Missing because he knows this feeling all too well.
When Bruce's daughter Brianna disappeared in March 2004, he was surrounded by licensed private investigators dedicated to finding her. Now his mission is to provide dedicated private investigators at no cost to other families of the missing, desperate for answers but without the financial means.
Private Investigations for the Missing needs your help. To read the mission statement, make a donation, and keep up with our blog, visit us at investigationsforthemissing.org and follow us at PI for the Missing on Twitter and Facebook and Investigations for the Missing on Instagram.
Because forever is too long to wait.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, on March 19th, 2004 at 11:20 p.m., 17-year-old Brianna Maitland clocked out of her shift at the Black Lantern Inn. But what happened next? Nobody knows, and Brianna was never seen or heard from again. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my vibrant co-host, Alice.
Hi, Brett. What a great V word. I don't think we've had that many. We could, do alphabet descriptors.
Yeah.
Jackpot, V, right there.
We could do that. We just knocked V out. I guess.
What is that on the Scrabble board?
But I guess that's okay. That's okay.
You know what? We do things unconventionally here at the Prosecutors.
We do. We do.
We start with V, throw them all around. We know we have to get to 26 eventually.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, as we go through the descriptors that I have lined up, people used to send us descriptors all the time. They have really fallen off. And we need more. So if you guys have thoughts... Are you just
complaining? This is your one job, Brett.
I'm asking
your one
for
job.
Help. I'm asking for help. I am not capable of coming up with enough words to name Alice. She is beyond description, so I need your help. Particularly, I love when you guys give us words in other languages. So shoot us some of those. You guys know how to get in touch with us, and we will use them in the future. Pretty much every word I use to describe Alice at this point has been provided by somebody. So that's how much they love you,
He's basically
Alice.
saying, please do his work for him. But here, let me do what I always do, which is tie this descriptor to our case today, because I think there's going to be a lot of vibrant discussion about this case, despite really everything happening very quickly. The disappearance we're about to talk about today, some may think there's not a lot there to talk about. And a lot of missing person cases, that is the case, where I don't think there are many leads you can go on. We may never know what's going to happen. But I don't think with this case, Brett, I think there's a lot to talk about. So I'm really glad that we're doing this case, because I know that you have some thoughts. I have some thoughts. I don't know what your thoughts are. So I'm looking forward to some vibrant discussion.
And I think this is one of the ultimate somebody knows something type cases. I think this is one of those where at least one person is involved in this. I think we're going to talk about some theories, and some of them are more along inadvertence or an accident of some sort. I think this is a case where there was a crime. And I think there's at least one person involved. It might even be probable that there's more than one. And that's why, even though this is an old case, 2004, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of this. Even though it's an old case, I think it's a solvable case. And I hope that, as always when we talk about these cases, if you know anything about this, you'll write in. This is a case that is extremely well covered. If you're fascinated by this, there are a lot of options out there. 2, I want to highlight Missing Brianna Maitland, who are done by the same people who did Missing Maura Murray. They have probably done more. Tim and Lance have probably done more investigation into this case, discussion of this case than anybody else. So that's a really good one to listen to. True Crime Garage did a great couple episodes on this as well. And then there's a podcast we don't talk about as much. It's called True Crime Twins, and they're sort of associated with Tim and Lance, and they've done a lot on this case as well. So there's a lot of options out there if you're really interested in it. We obviously will put up some links to those things. Some other things I want to talk about. There's a website called Uncovered. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it or not. It got started about the same time as we started our podcast. And early on, we had like a Zoom call with the folks who did it to talk through sort of what they were trying to do and what they thought would be useful. They have really taken that and ran with it. And now it has become sort of a repository for a lot of really good research and facts. So if this case and a lot of other cases, if they've covered it, then there's going to be a lot of facts there, a lot of links to articles, podcasts, everything where you can find something. This is a case where they are a great resource. We use them a lot, and if you're interested in this case, I really think you should take a look at it. But that's probably enough run-up, Alice. Let's go ahead. As you know, the joke goes, true crime podcasters 20 minutes in say, let's just dive right in. So let's go ahead.
Let's actually dive right in, because I think this is a case, like you said, because I think it's solvable. A lot of people have heard about it, but I also know many people have not. So I say, tell people about the story as if they have never heard of it before.
So Brianna Maitland, she was at a turning point in her life when she disappeared without a trace on March 19th, 2004. She was only 17 years old at the time. She was described by the television show Disappeared, which did an episode on her, as a, quote, attractive and smart young woman with an instinct to think of others before herself. Because all of those shows always describe people in these like super cliche ways. And they obviously interview her family and they describe her in that way as well. Though I think as we're going to go through this, we're going to see that Brianna was a complex person. Like most people, she wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. She had some problems, and a lot of those problems become important. This is a case where victimology is going to play into this a lot. We talk about victimology sometimes. We probably don't talk about it enough, frankly. And victimology is you look at a crime and you look at the victim and you look at all the things that are going on around the victim. And you look, frankly, at the things they're doing that put them in danger, the situations that they're in that put them in danger, the people around them that put them in danger. And we often are very careful to make the distinction between victimology and victim blaming. When you look at victimology, you really are trying to use the facts of the case and the facts surrounding the person and their activities in order to determine what happened. You're not saying it's their fault. You're not blaming them for what happened to them. You're trying to figure it out. And I think it's really important to always look at that and avoid the temptation to do things like, no offense to Disappeared, but to describe Brianna in this case in this sort of flowery way, in this sort of everything sunshine and rainbows, because it wasn't. And the fact that it wasn't is something that's going to become important as we talk more about her disappearance. And in fact, at the time, this entire period, really the months surrounding this, the days of her disappearance, this was a tumultuous 6-month period. And it actually ultimately led Brianna, who once again was only 17, to leave her parents' home and to drop out of high school. But at this point, we're getting into March of 2004, things appear to be looking up. It looks like Brianna is starting to bring things together. She's starting to kind of put her life back together. Despite the fact she dropped out of high school, she's now got 2 jobs. She's working. She's making money. She's trying to build a life for herself. She just passed her GED exam, and she has hopes of attending college in the future. So whatever had been happening, it seemed like Brianna was on the right path to build a life for herself. But when her car was discovered backed into an abandoned building in nearby Richford, Vermont, everyone was left to wonder what happened to Brianna Maitland. And one thing I will say, we're going to talk about photographs a lot in this case. There is a photograph of Brianna's car backed into this building, and it is difficult to describe how creepy the photograph is. Her mother said when she saw it, it gave her chills. And you might think, man, something horrible must be happening. There must be blood or some terrible thing. There's not. And that's what's so disturbing about it. I'm going to say this, knowing what happened obviously makes it disturbing, but there is something, just looking at it, that even if you did not know what happened, I think it would give you chills. And the people who took the photographs certainly felt that way. And if you haven't seen these pictures, if you're on YouTube, you're seeing them right now. Go out and look for them, because they are striking, and they will stick with you if you see them.
Yeah, absolutely, Brett. And since we're on this picture, let me just say a little bit more about it. It is so striking. It almost looks like a still out of some like artsy movie meant to be foreboding of something greater. It's, a desolate winter scene in Vermont. The grass is dead. There's a boarded up house. We'll talk about why it's boarded up, but it's abandoned. And this car, like you said, there's not like something catastrophic. Nothing's broken around it, except that it is awkwardly backed into this abandoned house. And you see this beautiful scenery in the background. I mean, it really is. There's snow on the ground. There's mountains in the background. But something about this is so eerie, especially because we know that there are many people who see this scene, and unfortunately it wasn't preserved as a crime scene. So all we have are these photos to go on, and we'll go more into that in just a moment. And I want to say something about that victimology that you talked about. I think it's important, and we'll see as we go through the timeline how she kind of falls into this category. But I think people think victimology only applies to a very obvious, vulnerable population. Runaways, people in certain trades like sex work, or who are actively using drugs and kind of running in those circles of people who are selling drugs. Let me just say that sometimes it just looks like someone who may be a little bit more transient in their life, not because they're living on the streets, but because of life circumstances, that they're bouncing from friend's house to friend's house, which Brianna was doing. And that kind of creates a situation where there's not as much accountability for knowing where she is hour by hour, day by day. And you'll see in this case that she has obviously a lot of people in her life who love her. She's very connected. She has friends to stay with. She has parents who love her and are connected with her. They're not cut off from each other. Yet, because of this transient period in her life, this kind of victimology puts her in a position where she can go missing, and a lot of evidence is capable of being lost because she's somehow kind of in the cracks of knowing where she is. So just know that victimology is not just for the very obviously vulnerable populations. It could look like you or me, and it could look like people who look like they're on their path to success as well.
And one thing about this, and you'll see this as we go through it, talk about victimology, not only is it important for trying to figure out what happened, but it also can be the reason that it's so hard to narrow things down. And this is going to be one of those cases. The circumstances that Brianna was in at the time mean that when we get to theories in this case, there are a ton of them. There's almost no theory that you can totally rule out because of the situation she was in. And as Alice said, a situation which is kind of transient, where there aren't people who know where she is all the time, where she isn't in contact with people, that the gamut of what this could be, this isn't one of those things where you can say for certain there's no way, for instance, she just ran off and started a new life because X, Y, and Z. When you actually look at her life and you look at some of the things she said, I don't think that's what happened, not to give away the end, but it is something she discussed. And so that's one of the things about this case that I think has grabbed people so much. It's not just a photograph, it's the fact that the possibilities here are endless. And as you look at sort of the structure or the lack thereof that she had, you'll see why that's the case.
Okay. let's go through what we always do, the timeline, and we're going to go back to before the day that she disappeared, because as we've talked about in other cases like Maura Murray, things were going on in her life, and when it's hard to narrow down what exactly led to her disappearance or whatever led to what happened that night, we kind of have to pull everything in to look at the whole picture. Some of it may not be relevant at all. We just don't know at this time. But we do know there was a lot of different things going on in her life, good and bad. And let's bring us back actually to October 2003. On October 8th, 2003, Brianna turned 17 years old, and her mother, Kelly Maitland, described in an episode of Disappear that we previously talked about, she had a, quote, growing need for freedom. Those of you living with teenagers, maybe seniors in high school, probably have felt this before. Things can still be even going well at home, but it's a time in life where naturally you start wanting more independence. And I think this is kind of something that Brianna was feeling, especially as she turned 17 and was on the cusp of adulthood and true freedom. That, coupled with Brianna's struggle to fit in at Mississauga Valley Union High School, led her to leave her parents' home in Franklin, Vermont, and move in with her friend Katie Manning in Enosburg, Vermont, where she enrolled in Enosburg Falls High School. I think more of her friends went to that school, and so she felt more comfortable going there. Now, understandably, her parents weren't really happy with this decision, but they also felt like they couldn't do anything to stop her. She was 17. She had the ability to work. She had a car. And they thought, well, the advantage of her being at this other school is that Brianna's friends attended there, and so maybe she would be more comfortable at her new school. Brianna left Katie's home in early December 2003, so she was only there for about 2 months. And from there on, she kind of bounced between the homes of two boyfriends. And this is what we were talking about earlier, where it's not that she just moved out of her parents' home and stayed with one friend for, say, the remainder of a school year. I've had friends who did that, right? Friends who perhaps their family had to move senior year of high school, and they decided to stay behind and finish out high school at the same school they've been to for the last 3 years and live with one family until they graduated. That's not the case here. Brianna stayed with Katie and then kind of just moved from house to house from there.
And let me take a moment here, because I've asked people about this. I was like, I want you to check me on this if I'm being judgmental or something. Because my daughter is not 17, she's 4. And I don't know what it's like to have a 17-year-old in the household. I remember being 17 vaguely. And, it was perfect, of course. Never did anything wrong. But it really bothers me that she's 17 years old and she's living with some friend. Then she moves out from the friend's house, and then she's bouncing between boyfriends' houses. She's changing high schools. There's no indication from what I've read and what I've seen that she comes from sort of a broken home or a violent home or anything like that. I mean, I've read rumors that maybe there were problems in her parents' relationship. Maybe before this, there was talk of getting a divorce. I've heard that she clashed with her mom, that she was closer with her dad. I mean, I don't know. Her dad apparently travels a lot for business, but I don't know. I mean, I had friends who did things like this when I was in high school. I mean, I knew people who were in this situation, and it was not a good situation to be in. It was always bad, but it usually came from a little bit more instability in the household than you see in this case. Like, I knew people who came from some really broken homes, and they were frankly better off living with a friend than they were at their parents' house. This one doesn't seem to be that, and that's something that, just in reading about this case and listening to stuff about this case, I feel like nobody ever really gets into. And maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it's kind of like Maura Murray, and if you talk to her family, they'll say, look, it doesn't matter why she left Amherst. Doesn't matter why she left UMass. Doesn't matter. All that's irrelevant. All that matters is what happened to her when he got to New Hampshire. And I'm always like, I don't know. I kind of feel like it is relevant. Here, it's a little less relevant, even if it is. But it still feels like it's important, and it feels like it's a big unanswered question that kind of hangs over the whole case.
I think that's a really good point, Brett. While researching this case, that was kind of a big question mark that was never answered for me, because I completely understand not further victimizing the family of the victim, right? When we talked about this with Aisha Degree, where there was so much, inquiry into how bad her home life must have been for Aisha to walk off into the night as a child. And there was nothing to substantiate that. So I don't mean to say, go on a wild goose chase and ask questions and kind of open inquiries that don't need to happen. But this situation stands out. And it is this situation that ultimately leads to the situation she's in, which is that nobody knows she's missing for a while. And I think when we talk about theories, what ultimately leads her to whatever could have opened up the possibility for her to go missing on this day in 2004. So I don't know if the hesitancy to ask the question is because the parents have been very, seemingly very involved in her life and they don't seem to have any problems, but the family doesn't necessarily have to have problems, but something is going on, whether it was intense bullying or something more than just feeling uncomfortable. And that's a word that I've seen across a lot of podcasts or people describing this case, is that what led to this big change in her life 6 months before she disappeared was she felt uncomfortable. I think that is putting a kind of blander word on something that needs a lot more discussion, and I don't know what that is. So I think someone might know something about this time that could be relevant to what ultimately led to, the events that are about to transpire.
And I do think that one of the problems, and we've danced around this as we talk about victimology, I do think there was something going on in her life, and I feel like she didn't have anybody she could talk to about it. And I think that's one reason that this is such a mystery. I think by the time she disappears, so many of the structures in her life are falling away, even though on the outside it looks like she's getting her life together. And that's one of the contradictions of this case. When you read about this case, you watch the Disappeared episode, you hear people talk about it. We did it at the beginning. They always say she was getting her life together because she had some jobs and she was looking to start in college and she'd finish her GED. And that's true, right? It's almost kind of like we talk about sometimes Facebook reality versus reality. If you looked at her Facebook page, which she didn't have in 2004, her MySpace page, it might have looked like everything's going great because she's got these jobs and she just got a GED and she's starting college. But at the same time, everything else is collapsing around her. And all of her friendships, all of her close relationships are collapsing. And whatever was happening to her, whatever was putting her in this situation, she did not share it with pretty much anyone. So that brings us to February 2004. And around this time, a lot of things start to happen. So in October, she leaves home. She's already a little unstable. She's moving between boyfriends. She's staying with different friends. But at least she's at a high school where she likes everybody and she knows everybody. But by February of 2004, she had started to grow more distant from that circle of friends that had brought her to Enosburg in the first place. Her housing situation at this point is so bad that she is sometimes living in her car. And she's living in her car in Vermont in February. And this is not sunny southern Vermont, if that exists. This is like right up at the Canadian border. It's cold. The day she disappears, the night she disappears, it's 8 degrees Fahrenheit. I have no idea what that is in Celsius, but it's below zero. I know that. I can do that math. It's really cold. It doesn't matter how you measure it in Kelvin. It's really cold. And she's living out of her car.
And this is why, Brett, I do think it's relevant why she left home in the first place 6 months ago, because you would think that if your housing situation gets so tumultuous, maybe you had a falling out with your friend group, just go home. It's February. It's so cold. But she doesn't do that, despite not being cut off from her parents, or seemingly so, because she seems to still have contact with her parents. And there's something strange there, right? Because I would imagine at least the offer was made at some point, or someone has said something. Whether it's a parent saying, hey, Brianna, why don't you just come home? I know you don't love being here, but let's just get through the winter. Or Brianna saying, hey, can I come home? Katie kicked me out, or something like that. But we don't know if that ever happened, or if one side didn't extend or the other side didn't extend. It just seems strange to have a continuing relationship with people who do have a house that you can live in and you don't, but there's no seeming strife there.
Look, I mean, I hate to dwell on this and I hate to focus on this because to some extent, this is an external thing and is unrelated to the events of the night she disappears. But it's really rough for her right now, and she's still 17, and yet she's not going home. She's not going home and saying, look, I don't want to live here full time, and I fully intend to get my feet underneath me and move, but I need help right now. She never does that. And like I said, there's no indication that things were so bad at home for the reasons that you might think that she couldn't go back. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. And in fact, from everything I have read and everything I've seen, both her parents, absolutely committed to finding her, loved her. You know, we're going to talk about one of the nonprofits that her father started at some point, which is a great nonprofit dedicated to helping other families who have missing family members. There is nothing about this family that screams, yeah, better to sleep in your car in 8-degree weather. But Brianna was doing it, and she was committed to being gone to that point that she's willing to bear that incredible hardship in order to stay gone.
Another point to put here is, remember the reason we were kind of given 6 months earlier for her leaving is because she wanted to be with her friends. That's something that can resonate with me about teenagers, about being 17 and wanting to be with my friends. I definitely counted my friends as my family over my actual family when I was at that age. You know, we would say that all the time, like nobody gets us but each other. The reason I don't think that's really the reason, or at least there's something more at play there, is that within a span of just 4 months, she's no longer close to them in a way that she doesn't really want to be at school with them or have any of them to stay with anymore. So that's a pretty big change in a short amount of time. Obviously, in your teenage years, you know, fights can be tumultuous, and someone who's your best friend one day can be your worst enemy the next. But I feel like we now hear the story that she left because she was uncomfortable in her high school, and so she wanted to be closer to all her friends. How close were they, or was that kind of a reason, post hoc reasoning of why she left at the time, because we don't want to talk about the real reason? Or maybe nobody close to her knows the real reason. Maybe that was the reason she gave, but I don't buy it, because just a couple months later, these friends that were so important for her to leave her home, her loving home seemingly, and then to start bumping around different houses. Now she's not even wanting to go to school, and she's not really connected to any of them at all. Suggests to me that there's something else that we were just not told before.
So around this time in February 2004, that's about the time she drops out of high school. She moves in with a friend in Sheldon, Vermont. That friend is Jillian Stout. But just because she dropped out of high school didn't mean she stopped her education. Instead, she enrolled in a high school equivalency program, a GED program, at a local community college, and as we said, she fully intended to continue her education. This is not, I think it's important. There are so many things about her that are fascinating and maybe even seemingly contradictory, because whatever was going on in her life and whatever's leading her to do things like sleep in her car and drop out of high school, she's still driven enough as a 17-year-old that she's trying to get an education. You know, she's got 2 jobs. There would be no shame in her just working those 2 jobs. But that's not what she's doing. She continues to try and better herself. And this is just one of those seeming contradictions that you see in this case. Something else is going to happen in February that is significant. Brianna is assaulted by her once close friend, maybe even best friend, Keely LaCrosse. This followed a verbal altercation at a party on February 27th in Richford, Vermont. Now, Keely and Brianna were reportedly both involved with the same man, James Robitaille. And in fact, if you believe Keely, they were involved with 2 different people. So I guess Brianna had maybe stolen Keely's boyfriend twice, and the last one was James. And they go to this party, and Brianna goes to the party with James, and Keely is there. She sees them together. This is no great mystery. She gets mad. At this point, James is like, hey, why don't you just wait in the truck? Or maybe Brianna says, I'm just going to wait in the truck. She leaves the party. She's in the truck. And this is to sort of get away from Keely. At this point, Keely comes to find her, and she goes outside. She finds her. She demands that Brianna roll down the window, which she does. She tells her to get out of the car because she's going to fight her. Brianna won't get out of the car. At this point, she actually punches her in the face twice. She tried to get Brianna to fight back, which probably would have been bad for Keely because apparently Brianna was actually, I think, a black belt in some martial art. I forget which one. Is it jiu-jitsu? Yeah. So, if she'd have fought back, it probably would have been bad for her. Her family actually asked her later on, why didn't you fight back? And Brianna said something along the lines of, I want to be liked. I didn't want people to be mad at me. So she'd rather get punched in the face twice than this friend group that's already falling away from her and apparently isn't that great a friend group to be with anyway. She doesn't want to irritate them. She would rather get punched. And these are real punches. She breaks her nose. She has 2 black eyes. She has a concussion. There's a photograph of this as well. You can find it online. And her family, including her aunt, who she was close with and had lived with at one point, get her to go ahead and press charges against Keely LaCrosse for the attack.
Okay. This particular altercation, I think, has alarm bells ringing for me. I don't have any answers for you. I'm just saying when I came across this altercation, even though we're, a month before her disappearance, we know that Brianna is very skilled in fighting. She is capable of defending herself. Now, we don't know what level of, substances she may have had that night. I don't know if they were drinking. If they're at a party, it could be a good guess that everyone involved is drinking or doing something else. So maybe she was so intoxicated that she couldn't fight back. But I don't think that is the situation. I think she had the wherewithal to know it was a bad situation and that she should not be in that situation, right? We've had those friends who, even if someone suggests, hey, you need to walk out of the room to cool off while, this situation is getting too steamy. If the person is very angry or drunk, they may rebuff that effort to save them whatever altercation is coming. Brianna is not in that state. She knows that she needs to leave the situation and she tries to leave the situation. She does not escalate it inside. She leaves and is actually trying to separate herself from Keely. When Keely comes out, fight or flight typically takes over when you're being attacked. When you're being attacked with punches that are so severe that they'll give you a concussion, how kind of messed up she is afterwards physically, I would think would take more than 2 punches. And it could have been just 2 really good punches, but it would have taken a lot of self-control for anyone's fight or flight instinct not to kick in, and at the very least, self-preserve. At the very least, put up your hands to defend your face, maybe from the second punch at least. Maybe the first one catches you off guard, but it is really hard to keep yourself from defending yourself. And in defending yourself when you're being attacked in such a vicious manner, you naturally attack. It looks like an attack even if you're just trying to defend yourself. We know she didn't do any of that because we know that she didn't fight back in the least with Keely. And I mention this because whatever is happening inside Brianna's head is very, very powerful. Whether it was guilt for stealing Keely's boyfriend or some other thing, it may be bigger than just a boyfriend thing. She had the tenacity to keep herself from defending herself and fighting back in a way that she was capable of doing, even for just self-preservation purposes. Maybe depression. Maybe I'm listing all these things because I literally have no idea, except that it is something powerful, more powerful than our instinctual capacity to fight back or at the very least defend ourselves. And she doesn't do that. And that is a huge flag that's blaring at me because of what then happens next.
And I think it goes to what we talked about earlier with sort of the collapse of a lot of support structures around her. These are the friends that she went there for. Keely is one of those people. There is no question that they were friends at one point. And she has a situation where she's at a party with her boyfriend. I guess the boyfriend wasn't ready to leave the party because he wanted to go ahead and stay inside while she had to go wait in the truck, right? Chivalry is not dead, gentlemen. But, she gets in the situation where she's so desperate to be liked at this point that she just lets this girl beat her up, basically. And that's not my judgment. That's what she said. That's what she said happened, and the reason that she did that. And I agree with you, Alice. I think it is a huge waving red flag about a situation that she's in where there are fewer and fewer people that she can trust and she can rely on. And I think that is a problem that we're going to see, and frankly, that wish her ill will. Keely certainly did, and Keely wasn't happy about having charges pressed against her either. So we'll see how that develops as this case continues.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's obviously more to come, but I think this is a precursor to what's about to happen. She didn't fight back this time because of whatever was happening inside her head that was so overpowering, and I think it comes into play later as well. Let's go to Friday, March 19th, 2004. On that morning, Brianna was scheduled to take her high school equivalency exam, and Brianna's mom, Kelly Maitland, picks her up to grab breakfast before the exam. And this interaction is what I was talking about, where it seems like they still have a relationship. It's they're going out to eat. It's a celebratory thing before Brianna goes to take this test. I mean, it sounds like a completely normal relationship thing to do, right? And we don't have any indication that there was any sort of tension during this breakfast. At 12 o'clock, to celebrate earning her GED, Kelly Maitland took Brianna shopping. While in a checkout line, Brianna was looking out the window when something caught her attention. She informed Kelly that she'd be right back, and she left the store. So Kelly stayed in the store, finished checking out, and Brianna actually didn't return to the store. Instead, Kelly met her in the parking lot. But she wasn't able to deduce where Brianna had been or what had happened. Kelly stated in an episode of Disappeared that upon Brianna's return, her whole mood changed, and she was agitated and eager to get home to get ready for her shift at the Black Lantern Inn later that day. Now, Kelly didn't really want to push Brianna to reveal what happened or where she'd gone, if she'd talked to anybody, but she did notice this sudden shift in her mood. And instead of pressing her on it, she just drops Brianna back off at Jillian's home for her to get ready for her shift. This would be the last time that Kelly would ever see her daughter. There's a lot to talk about there, but we don't know what happened in that moment. It's speculated that when Brianna abruptly left the store, that someone may have tried to warn her not to go to work that evening. It seems like she probably had a conversation with someone that she did not share with the people who are talking.
And this is one of those things where, is this significant because of what happened, or is it significant because of what happened? That may be confusing, so let me explain. Is it significant because something bad happened to her, and now we look back with 20/20 vision, and we look and we see weirdness in places where there wasn't really weirdness, and now all of a sudden we're so focused on this, and in fact, she just went to the bathroom and was like, I'll just meet my mom in the car. And then by the time she got the car, she was just ready to get, she'd had enough of her mom. She'd seen her for breakfast. She'd seen her for lunch. She'd been shopping with her. She needed to get ready for her time at the Black Lantern, and she's ready to get on. Or maybe her mom took too long. Could be that. It also could be that something happened that is directly related to what happened to her later that night. It's impossible to know the answer to that question. And it's impossible to know for one of the reasons we've been talking about. Because there's no one that she talks to. If she had, imagine that the speculation, the sort of most extreme speculation is true. That somebody talked to her in that parking lot and told her, if you go to work tonight, something terrible is going to happen to you. Imagine that happened. Well, she didn't tell a soul about it. She didn't tell her mom that we know of. She didn't tell her mom. She didn't tell her aunt. She didn't tell her friend that she was staying with. She didn't tell any of the friends in her family. She just kind of acted weird, and then she went to work. And her mom didn't press her on it, and I think that's just sort of their relationship at this point was whatever was going on with Brianna, unless she wanted to share it, her mom wasn't going to press her. And I'm not going to judge her mom for that, because I think her mom knew the relationship she had with her daughter at that point and knew if she pressed her, she wouldn't get anywhere, and it probably would just make it worse. And of course, she didn't think this is going to be the worst thing ever. Now, as we talk more about what happened that night, we talk about theories, I actually think what happened in the parking lot probably is related to what happened later that night, but I don't think you can rule out the possibility that this is just a benign event that's been sort of blown out of proportion after her eventual disappearance.
Angie has made it easier than ever to connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. If you own a home, you know how much work it can take. Whether it's everyday maintenance and repairs or making dream projects a reality, it can be hard just to know where to start. But now, all you need to do is Angie that and find a skilled local pro who will deliver the quality and expertise you need.
And Alice, you can turn to Angie with confidence no matter what the size of your home or the size of your project. Whether you've got a 100-year-old house like I do, where it seems like things are always breaking, or if you're renting and you're needing someone to help you with moving, installations, or cleaning, Angie is there for you, and they're there for you with confidence. So, Angie has over 20 years of home service experience, and they've combined it with new tools to simplify the whole process. Bring them your project online or with Angie's app, answer a few questions, and Angie can handle the rest from start to finish. Or they can help you compare quotes from multiple pros and connect instantly, which means you can take care of just about any home project in just a few taps. Because when it comes to getting the most out of your home, you can do this when you Angie that. Download the free Angie mobile app today or visit Angie.com. That's ANGI.com. Check them out today. Angie.com. ANGI.com.
The Prosecutors Podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy.
All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare, so it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at Progressive.com to join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Guys, have you ever been on the hunt for a new doctor and you ask literally everyone you know for their recommendation? You know, a doctor who actually gets you, listens to you, and makes you feel super comfortable. Hard to believe they exist. And finally, after weeks of searching, you find the one. The best doctor, the one that fits you perfectly. They're close by. It's exactly the doctor you want to use. And then you call them up. They have an appointment available soon. Everything's going great. But then the receptionist tells you that your perfect doctor doesn't take your insurance. Wipe your tears, put away the ice cream, and head over to ZocDoc to find and book the doctor who is right for you and takes your insurance. I just had a birthday. I'm getting older. I need a doctor. Not a surprise to any of you out there listening that I don't actually take care of myself very well and haven't been to the doctor in a while. So I got on ZocDoc, and it was amazing how easy it was to see which doctors in my area take my insurance. It is an amazing tool, and you're going to love it.
ZocDoc is a free app where you can find amazing doctors and book appointments online. We're talking about booking appointments with thousands of top-rated patient-reviewed doctors and specialists. You can filter specifically for ones who take your insurance, are located near you, and treat almost any condition you're searching for. Learn from Brett's mistake and get on ZocDoc now. Go to ZocDoc.com/prosecutors and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/prosecutors. ZocDoc.com/prosecutors.
Guys, we want to talk to you about one of our favorite sponsors, HelloFresh. You know them, you love them. With HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. We talk about the firecracker meatballs all the time. They are amazing. They are awesome. But to change it up a little bit, if you haven't had the street tacos, check them out. You're going to love them. I promise you. Fall is about to start, and you need to kick it off with a fresh fall routine. And HelloFresh can take you there. They will handle all the meal planning and shopping to deliver everything you need to cook up a tasty meal right at home. They do all the hard work, and when it comes to options, more is more. That's why HelloFresh's menu includes 40 recipes and over 100 add-on items to choose from every single week.
Brett, it's not an overstatement to say that I love HelloFresh. I particularly love their crispy Parmesan chicken. My kids truly gobble that up. There's never anything left over, even though the portions are huge. When you get HelloFresh, you know you're getting top-notch produce since it travels from the farm to your door in less than 7 days. Go to HelloFresh.com/50TP and use code 50TP for 50% off plus 15% off the next 2 months. Go to HelloFresh.com/50TP and use code 50TP for 50% off plus 15% off the next 2 months. And find out with us why HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. I think that's right, Brett. I think that's very important to know whether we're looking through the lens of, post hoc justification. But it does seem, we do know that she left the store at least, and then there was there was something that happened. I wish she had said something, and this goes to the next thing that's about to happen. So perhaps this was her way of telling someone without telling anyone what happened. So why don't you say what happened in the next timeline? In the timeline.
So at that point, her mom has dropped her off at Jillian's house. Remember, she's living with her friend Jillian at this point. It is around 3:30 p.m. Now, Brianna, she leaves a note for Jillian explaining that she's going to work and she'll be back home later that night. And Jillian confirms that she saw the note early in the evening of the 19th, but she's actually leaving for a weekend trip until Sunday the 21st. And this is another one of those circumstances that makes the situation even worse. And we talked about this kind of thing happening before. We had the one case with David Lewis, I believe his name was, who his wife went shopping. He was supposed to watch the Super Bowl in Texas, and then all of a sudden he ends up in a hit-and-run accident in Washington, and who in the world knows what happened in that case. But because of that delay, it adds to the mystery. We talked about Trevor Dealey in Dublin, where his roommates were gone for the weekend, and he disappeared on a Thursday night after a party. Nobody really expected him to be at work on Friday because they had drank so much. So nobody thinks he's missing on Friday. Saturday and Sunday pass, and nobody even realizes he's missing until Monday. And all that time that you lose. Similar situation here, because Brianna is living sort of in this situation where the only person who really knows whether she comes or goes is Jillian, and Jillian's going to be gone for the weekend. It is another situation in which days are going to pass, important days, valuable days, and we're going to lose all of that information.
So here is a piece of information that I couldn't find anywhere in researching this case, and maybe one of you knows this. And I think the only person who really is going to know this are the people that Brianna stayed with. It struck me that Brianna goes home after this potential mood-changing event with her mom. She won't tell her mom anything, but she comes home, and remember, she's living a very transient lifestyle. She lives with different people, different times. She hasn't been staying with Jillian for months at a time. Yet, she goes home and leaves a note for Jillian specifically saying, "I'm going to be back tonight," as if she was warned about something earlier in the day, and she wanted a record of something for someone to know, if something happens tonight, I meant to come home. So she probably knows that Jillian's going to be gone for the weekend. Maybe she doesn't, but if you're living with someone, I would think that she would have some idea that Jillian either leaves on the weekends or she was going to be gone. And this note doesn't really do anything. I would be surprised if Brianna leaves a note at all of the different houses that she's lived in for the past 6 months to tell every single different person where she's going to be, because I don't think Brianna knows where she's going to be each night. You don't choose to spend the night in your car. You do that at a last resort. Therefore, she is in a situation where she doesn't know where she's going to be day to day. So much so that it wouldn't make sense to leave your roommates of that morning a note of where you're going to be that night, because you don't know where you're going to be that night, unless she had some indication that something was going to happen that day and she wanted one piece of record out there. We all joke, right? I know I text my friends, guys, I'm about to go to so-and-so. If you don't hear from me, I didn't run away. I make that joke, kind of. But I'm not joking because I'm really saying, guys, I'm not going to disappear. So if I disappear, something bad has happened. I don't think she told Jillian why, but the fact that she's leaving a note in this stage of her life when there's no stability to say, Jillian, you may not see this. This note isn't for today. This note is for whatever case that may transpire, because I have a feeling I might not make it home tonight. I'm not the reason. I am not running away. And we'll get to theories later. But I think that's what this note is for. It's to say, I didn't run away, despite my lifestyle looking like someone who can run away at any moment.
This is why I love doing this podcast with you, Alice, because you're 100% right. I wondered exactly the same thing. Does she do this regularly? Was it unusual for her to leave a note? Because the fact that she left a note, like, of course she's going to be back later, right? She lives with her. She goes to work every day. She works 2 jobs. Does she normally leave a note saying that? No, I agree with you 100%. It's a question I've never seen asked or answered, which I would love to have asked and answered, because if that was just who she was and she left notes all the time, no big deal. No big deal.
And here's where someone can know something. Jillian may not know the answer to this, but we know that she lived with several people during this time. Based on this timeline alone, we know of at least 4 different people. Katie, 2 boyfriends, Jillian. Probably some other people. People who know she lives in her car. Because guess what? Talking about victimology, risk factors, if you live in your car, people notice. People who want to prey on you notice. So at least 4 people that she's lived with can speak to whether it is common for her to leave notes. But based on what we know about her life so far, I would find it highly surprising that it would be her regular practice to leave notes for her roommates.
Yeah, and this is going to be a 2-parter, by the way, if you haven't noticed. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and finish up the timeline for this day and for early the next morning. We'll leave you with that, and then we'll go ahead and be back with you next week. So she leaves this note. She goes off to the Black Lantern Inn in Montgomery, Vermont for her shift as a dishwasher. The restaurant is busy, but busy for this restaurant is a relative term. It's a pretty small restaurant. It doesn't have a huge clientele. But, you know, they're busy. They're not just all sitting around. The other employees report that Brianna seemed like she was normal. There were no notable incidents occurring during her shift. If Brianna was nervous or worried about anything happening, she didn't let it on with the people that she was working with. At 11:20 p.m., her shift ended, and she's invited to hang out with some coworkers. Anybody who's ever worked in a restaurant situation, you know exactly what this is. Half the time, the restaurant starts to close down. You hang out, you smoke some cigarettes, maybe you drink some beers, you talk, whatever, smoke some pot, depending on where you are, and then you leave. Well, she says, can't do that tonight. She's got a second job at a place called KJ's Diner in St. Albans, Vermont, and she says she has an early morning shift the next morning. Another thing I have not been able to find out, whether or not that was true. I don't know if that was true or not. I don't know if she actually had an early morning shift the next morning or if this is just an excuse to leave for whatever reason. Either way, that's what she tells her friends. She clocks out at 11:20 p.m. and is seen leaving the Black Lantern Inn in her 1985 Oldsmobile 88 Royale. And I just have to stop and say, my first car was the Delta 88 in Oldsmobile. I loved that car. Apparently, Brianna loved her car too. It is a combination of a boat and a tank. That is what it is. You absolutely could live in it because it was huge.
So my younger brother was born in it.
There you go. There you go. And
didn't make it to the hospital in time. I don't know if it was
have a baby.
Don't know if it was in 1985, but it was a mid 80s Oldsmobile, and it was a tank, and he was born in it.
Yeah, and those mid 80s, it was
was
like
a boat.
This car. It was like blue with a purple interior. I love that car so much. Basically, though, by the time I was really ready to drive, my parents were like, yeah, you need a different car. So they had to sell it and get the Toyota, which I love the Toyota too. But, man, you could not beat the Delta 88. And she loved her car too. That's another thing people always said. They loved her car. She loved her car, and people would see that car. A 1985 car in 2004, I guess that was only 20 years, right? But got to think it was still pretty rare.
But it's a distinctive car, and it's usually a car that I think it's not really a teenager's car. And this is all noteworthy because she has a very distinctive car, meaning if she's living out of her car, she's probably parking in places and people will recognize this car. It's not just a Toyota Corolla, a black Toyota Corolla. That could be any other car out there. It is a distinctive car, and if you saw it, you probably knew who was in that car. There probably weren't many like hers, especially when you have a 20-year-old car. There are going to be dings and kind of things that happen to your car over 20 years that make it distinctive to you. So in the late evening hours of the March 19th, early morning hours of the 20th, there are several sightings of Brianna's green sedan backed into an abandoned farmhouse off of Route 118 in Richford, Vermont, known by locals as the Old Dutchburn House. This site was roughly 1.3 miles from the Black Lantern Inn. In other words, it doesn't appear that Brianna made it very far. And as we said, because this is a distinctive car and this scene is eerie and stands out from the ordinary, it's not just a car parked off on the side of the road. We have several witnesses who report seeing Brianna's car. The first witness reports seeing her car somewhere between 11:30 and 12:30. This was a man driving along Route 118, and he said that he saw a vehicle backed into the abandoned farmhouse at a weird angle with the vehicle facing the road. He believed that the headlights were on. He did not see anyone inside or outside of the vehicle. That's a pretty long window of time, but if it were as close as 11:30, her car is only found 1.3 miles from the Black Lantern. It seems likely that she went straight there and didn't get very far. It doesn't appear that she went home, for example, and then came back to the Old Dutchburn house. Otherwise, I think we'd have more sightings of the car further down the road.
Let me just say about these witnesses, the one thing I love about all of them is they are the most realistic witnesses about time I've ever seen. We always tell you guys when we're talking about timelines, people always get times wrong. Times are all over the place. If you start being a stickler about 15 minutes here and 15 minutes there, good luck on ever figuring anything out. In this case, everybody's like, could have been any time between an hour or so. And it's like, yeah, that is much more accurate than you ever get from anybody describing times.
Absolutely. And one thing to note about what this man reports, and it sounds also like a very realistic memory of something that you may have just driven past. So it's going to be very dark, obviously around the midnight hour in March. It's winter time. This is not a big highway. There's not like street lights out. If in fact the headlights were on, I think that he probably remembered that. And here's the thing. He notes at least that the car was facing the road, meaning the headlights would be facing the road and would probably be shining into his eyes with him looking at it. And if that were the case, I think that you have to kind of think about what he's able to see when lights are shining into your eyes. You may not be able to see people if there are people there, especially if those people are trying to stay hidden in the darkness. Think about the way light works, right? If light's shining straight into your eyes, it's pretty easy to hide in the shadows. So even though this witness doesn't see anyone in or outside of the vehicle, you have to take into account the angle at which the light is shining towards him as well. He's not the only witness. Witness number 2, sometime between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m., another man driving along Route 118 also witnessed the vehicle in the same position, backed up into that Old Dutchburn house. He states that the turn signal was on. This, kind of in conjunction with the other witness, we don't know who saw the car first. It sounds like probably witness 1 saw it first and then witness 2. And one of them remembers a turn signal on, the other remembers a headlight. Likely, probably both of them were on at this time. But the point being, they both saw lights. That's why it's stuck with them. Otherwise, it might be actually very difficult to pick out this car in the middle of the night, dark country road. Witness number 3. This is definitely later than those first 2 sightings, because this is actually from Brianna's ex-boyfriend, James Rubatali, who, remember, we talked about back in February with the altercation with Keeley. He said that he passed this scene driving home from a party somewhere between 2:30 a.m. and 4 a.m. He recognized that this was Brianna's vehicle. Makes sense because they were together at least at some point. It's a distinctive looking car. And he was so convinced it was her car, and he was right, that he pulled off of the road to see what was going on. It was such a weird angle that he was worried something was wrong with Brianna, even though they were no longer together. He noted that he did not see anyone in or around the car, but he had been drinking that night and was worried about getting in trouble, so he didn't report this to the police that night. Uncovered reports that James claimed the headlights were on and both the driver and passenger side doors were open. They go on to say that James actually turns off the lights of the car and closed the doors and then kind of got out of there before, because he didn't want to get caught for a DUI.
And look, easy to say sitting here in my seat, but I'd like to think that even if it were my ex-girlfriend and I found a car in that situation, that at some point, I don't know, at least maybe the next morning, maybe when I got home, if I'm really worried about a DUI, I'd have called the cops and said something. He doesn't do that. He just closes the doors and turns off the lights. We're going to come back to James later on. I think this is very strange. I think this raises a lot of suspicions, a lot of red flags. And there's a lot going on here.
I think that's right. We don't typically find cars with both doors open and lights on. That indicates at least a quick exit. And there's nowhere to go really on foot at this point. It is freezing. And we're going to come back to this, but there is a lot to discuss here, especially when this could be half truths or there's a lot more to the story here than we know. But I don't think we have any reason to doubt that he did see this scene that night. Whether he was the only one who saw it and whether that's all he saw is another question.
And we know, and we're going to talk about this more later, when the car is eventually found, the lights are off and the doors are closed. And that is a distinction from what you hear from the first two individuals. So I think it probably is the case that he did stop and do that. Go look at the photograph, because it's not just that it's her car pulled off on the side of the road with the doors open. Look at the photograph and the position of the car. They talk about this some on True Crime Garage, which is a great show if you don't listen to it. And they have a little debate about whether or not this scene is eerie on its own, or if only because we know. I am convinced that it's eerie on its own. There's proof of that we're going to talk about next time, but I am convinced it is. I realize that I know what's going to happen, so I'm operating under some bias that's unavoidable, but I just think it would be creepier no matter what. If you were driving down the road in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, by that creepy house, the kind of place they pay people $10,000 to spend the night in and do like a ghost hunt, and you saw a car backed into it the way that car is, with both doors open and the headlights on, the hair on the back of your neck would be standing up. You didn't see that and think nothing of it. And the fact that he just drives on his way and goes to sleep and doesn't think about this till later is a little strange to me.
And I will point one thing out. Let's say everyone's self-interested. I saw that scene and I know whose car that is, and I don't want to get caught for a DUI or something. You know what I would actually do to make sure it drew attention to itself? Keep driving and not alter the state of that car, because the fact that the lights are on is going to draw police attention to it. The fact that the doors are open is going to draw attention to it. Think about when you're driving on the highway and you see a car parked on the side of the road. When there's those cars that break down and they have like the little pink tag or whatever for, I guess, tow trucks to come get them, but the doors are closed and it's very clear that someone shuttered it for the tow truck to come. So you just keep going. But I call 911 when I see a car on the side of the road and there's like smoke coming out of it, or the doors are all open and I don't see anybody and it's kind of askew. Maybe one tire's still in the highway and I'm like, wow, that's a real hazard. Someone's going to hit that. Because of that scene, it looks chaotic. It doesn't look like someone's taken care of it and is, the next step is coming. The tow truck is coming. I don't have to worry about it. When I see a chaotic scene, I call 911. Like, hey guys, I'm at exit 1. Maybe someone already called it in, but I'm seeing a car with all their doors open and one of the wheels is in the interstate and I don't see anyone around. Maybe you guys have taken care of it, but in case not, this looks like a real hazard. Something's happened. And that's it. And I move on. By closing the doors and turning off the lights, you are making it a situation where it will not draw as much attention. And this was a scene that screamed that it needed attention.
And look, to try and see both sides of this, it's possible he was really drunk. We think we're all thinking good citizen, like, maybe he'd had a couple drinks when he left the party, and, he probably shouldn't be driving, but he's fine. It's possible he was completely smashed and wasn't thinking, and the nicest thing he could think to do was close the doors and turn off the lights. Didn't want to say anything at the time because he was so drunk, went home, passed out, never thought of it. I don't think that's the case, because he was in his right mind enough to do 3 things. To be driving by, notice the car, and recognize it, even if it has its headlights on, to recognize it in the darkness that it was her car. To go ahead and pull over, to turn the lights off, to close the doors, and to realize, but I shouldn't call the police because I've been drinking, so I need to go on. So I don't think this is a case where he was just so drunk that it's hard to hold him accountable for what exactly he did. I think what he did was, I think it was questionable, and I think it's going to come up more, and I think it's a reason when you're thinking about suspects in this case that he has to be one, because isn't it convenient that if his fingerprints were on that car door or inside that car, well, of course they were. I had to get in to turn off the lights, and I had to close the doors, so no big deal. Okay, so we got a lot more to talk about in this case. This case is one of those, it is haunting, it is creepy, it is sad, it is tragic, and it is full of things to talk about. We got about halfway through today. We're going to finish up next time, no matter how much time it takes, because the next week will be October, and so we have to move on to October cases. But we've already highlighted a few things that are questions, that are open questions, that if people know the answers to, it'd be great to know. I am stunned how many people who listen to the show end up having a personal connection to cases. It is amazing to me. And if you're someone who knew Brianna or would have had any connection to her and you can answer some of the questions we've asked, we would love to hear them. If you're out there listening to this, I want you to go look at that photograph. Our website, prosecutorspodcast.com, will have a photograph up there. If you Google this case, it is the first thing that comes up. There are multiple photographs of different angles that you can see, and I think you will recognize immediately why this case is so striking. That photograph grabs you in a way that nothing else will. Our amazing artist, Hannah, has done art for this case. I never tell her what to do. I just say, hey, next week we're doing this case, and then sometime later I get an email, and there's the art for the case. And in this case, of course, it is this. It is that photograph with her artistic flourish on it, and it's amazing, and I hope you guys will check it out.
I'm convinced that Hannah is one of the smartest true crime listeners out there, because she is able to pinpoint the important part of a case through her artwork every single time. I get chills every time I open up the artwork for the next case, and it sometimes is even before I've done all my research for the case. And I'm like, how did you totally grip onto exactly what matters here?
I mean, more than one time, Hannah's art has been better than the episode. There's no question.
Really, we're nowhere near as good as the artwork on the episode.
And she's amazing, and she's committed to her artwork. She does a lot of art outside of this podcast. I hope you guys will Google her, visit her studio, buy art from her. I have a piece. If you're watching live, you can see it's behind me. I don't know which way to move my head. Hanging on the wall. It's amazing. And then I have this print that I need to get it framed. I haven't got it framed yet, which is awesome. I mean, she's incredible. I love her. And you guys should check her out as well. Okay, Alice, do you want to do a question?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's see. Let's try and do something positive, because it's been, as I always say, I act like true crime's not depressing.
We're always positive, Brett.
That's true.
Although tonight has given me the creeps, this episode.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to skip all the legal questions people ask us. I'm just going to consider those like requests for legal briefs episodes. So if you sent me legal questions. Okay, this is from Krista B. Did you guys come up with the idea for this podcast on your own, or was it one of you, or some sort of podcast producer, etc.?
Yes, we're like NSYNC. There were auditions for a boy band or girl boy podcast, and we auditioned.
I don't actually know Alice. She's complete random.
Who are you? Where do you
don't know.
live? What do you? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, they made us hang out like the cast of Friends. They all like went to Vegas for a weekend to get to know each other before they started shooting. They just sent us to like a Bama game, and we got to know each other.
It's true.
I'm just kidding.
I guess it was my idea. It was definitely my idea. I've been wanting to do a podcast.
100% Brett's
it was
idea.
my idea.
Take the
I've
credit.
been wanting to do a podcast for a while. I had another friend who was a doctor that I was going to do it with. And then he became like CEO of a medical company that went public and made $1 billion. And all of a sudden he didn't want to do a true crime podcast anymore. So I kind of put that aside. And then I honed in on Alice as my next victim. And fortunately, she has not made $1 billion yet.
This could have been something so different.
It could have been.
Two Bretts.
It could have been two. It would have been as good. Like, having a doctor would have been interesting. He was a surgeon, too, so he, like, knew all kinds of stuff. I mean, he would have been, all these questions we have, medical questions, he would have been able to answer. So there's that. But it wouldn't have been as good. It wouldn't have been as good. It's so much better. Screw that guy.
Keep going. Keep going. I'm not convinced yet that
Alice
you
is
really
amazing.
wanted me.
Yeah.
All you guys have to know is I'm plan B.
Alice was always my first choice, even though I knew the other guy first. And it worked out. It worked out. And like I said, I mean, we talked about it for a long time. And by talked about it, I just continuously was like, we need to do this. We need to do this. We need to do this. And then finally one day Alice was like,
well, I kept saying
okay.
no, no, no.
And then finally she was like, okay. And then when she said okay, I was like, well, then I'm about to buy $1,000 worth of podcast equipment. I hope you're ready. Because once I buy it, you have to do it.
He really did do that. You really texted me. We're like, I'm about to hit buy.
I'm about to
we don't
purchase
have any
this.
money.
Yeah. So that's how it got started. It was all my fault. Alice graciously agreed to do it, and here we are.
I think I've told you this before, but can I make a confession?
Of course.
I said yes. Only because I didn't think we were actually going to do it.
See, you've learned now not to do that.
I thought there's no way we're going to actually record. And if we recorded, no one would listen. So we'd make like 5 episodes and then go along our merry way. That's why I said okay.
It's kind of like October, our discussions about October, and you've said you'll do it. So, just know that I'm always serious.
Yeah, now I know. Now
With these
I know.
crazy ideas, I'm always
you follow
serious.
through.
So, yeah. Okay, let's do one more.
Okay.
This one's a little old, but I'll go ahead and do it. Do you two ever work on cases together, or do you typically have your own caseloads? So we used to work on cases together back when we worked together, Alice and
I'm
I.
so sad. You're making me sad right now.
Yeah, we did 2 trials together, which were awesome. But Alice, we both had our own things too. We tried to do as much together as possible. And I had this dream that we basically would try all our cases together. That we would just become a unit and we would do everything together, and that's what we do. And we were headed that way. And then Alice decided, you know what? I would rather go provide for my family, my growing family. That's the way I'm going to put it. Provide after a decade of public service, it was time for Alice to move on. And so Alice, as someone in the chat said, she dumped me. She dumped me for private practice.
I did not dump you.
So it's really, at this point, the podcast is really just the prosecutor and Alice.
Singular. And associate. The prosecutor and associate.
And associate. So.
No, we've worked a couple jobs together. Technically, I think you could say we had 3 jobs together. We had really 2 jobs together, but then kind of a 3rd job together. So we work really well together, obviously. And then when we were prosecutors, even though we had our own caseloads, we spent so much time together. We knew each other's cases really well. And so if anyone needed to cover a hearing, I would always go to Brett first and Brett would come to me because we knew each other's cases, because that's what you do as friends. We would go get coffee and just talk about our cases and also true crime.
Yeah, I had to arrest a bunch of her witnesses once for one of her
because I was in
trials.
trial.
Yeah, and none of the witnesses showed up.
Sorry about that.
So off I went.
Forgot about that.
With my warrants.
I think I texted you even from trial, and I was like, I need you to go arrest a bunch
Yep.
of people.
And we did it.
And so thanks for doing that. And I think if I stayed, and look, public service is probably calling me back at some point. I think we would have tried and probably will try all our cases together because it just goes well. And it goes well in the courtroom too, because I think people like the yin and the yang of how different we are in the courtroom too. So it's really fun to work on cases with Brett.
I mean, look, if you're a lawyer and you have someone that you can work together on a case, it is so great because you understand each other, because there's so many decisions that have to be made. Making decisions is the main thing you have to do as a lawyer, period. It's not about the law. It's not about any of that. It's just being able to make a good decision when faced with a question, because that is what you do more than anything. And when you have someone that you trust to make a decision for you and then they'll do it correctly, if you have that person, you can work on cases together, man, that's what you want.
I think the only reason I'm okay right now is because Brett and I do this podcast and it feels like we're still doing cases together because we're still feeding off each other. And that's the beauty of having like a real work partner, is there is absolutely no looking behind like your shoulder being like, is this person out to get my case or to, somehow undermine me with the agents or with the witnesses? Not even to be mean, just because people have different ways of operating. With Brett, I mean, we have such a good working relationship where I know things will get done and that we have each other's back no matter what. And a lot of these cases that we worked on, there was so much going on, so much of the witnesses lying to us. Agents maybe getting their wires crossed because they worked for different agencies and there were jurisdictional battles. And like, we would just be like high-fiving in the hallway as we like went from witness room to like break down another witness. And like, we could like communicate what happened within words as opposed to like an entire paragraph or a memo because we worked together so well.
And sometimes I wonder, like in the podcast, would it be better to have someone that I just disagree with all the time? I don't think it would. I think I would hate that, actually. I think that would be a terrible life. But every time we do a case, I'm always like, is this the one where Alice is going to fundamentally disagree with me? Not a minor disagreement, like the end of the Adnan case or the Maura Murray case. But like we got this, I'm not going to say which one it is, but we're researching a big case right now. Big case, big podcast, big trial. We're going to do it. And as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I wonder, is Alice going to come to the same conclusion as me? Are we going to be on opposite sides? Like, I just don't know. And up to this point, invariably, we have been on the same side.
But like this episode is a really good example. We really did not talk about Brianna Maitland at all. Like, literally, we decided the name of the case. It was like, this is the subject. End of discussion. We have not talked about a single thing. So everything we talked about in the episode today, I'm hearing for the first time from Brett and vice versa. And I think so there is no shaping each other's thinking on it, really. And I am surprised how much but I think that's kind of the trust and the cohesion and the way our brains have learned to function together over the years of working together.
Yeah. So that was a long answer to your short question, but we have worked together and it was awesome and we loved it. And I wish we still did, but maybe in the future. You never know what might happen.
Maybe in the future.
So, and obviously we always, cross your fingers, always will have the podcast. So we can always do that together.
There you go. So it feels like I'm getting my Brett working fix here.
She'll tell me, I'll see her sometimes in person. She's like, I've missed you. And I was like, I just saw you on Tuesday. She's like, that doesn't count.
It's not the same. We used to see each other at least 5 days a week, if not more.
Exactly. All right. Well, that's our questions for today. All of those of you in the chat asking what case it is, we're not going to tell you. Sorry. You have to wait. You'll know before most people. You'll learn like
that's
4 weeks early. So quit complaining. And October's coming up. It's interesting because we did Adnan. It was 14 episodes long. We've now done 2 one-off episodes. This one will be 2 episodes. And then we're going to do 5 October episodes, all of which will be 1 episode. Maybe if it's too long, we'll break it into 2 and do it in 1 week. So trying to give everybody a little bit of everything. If you're somebody who likes long stuff, we do that. We also do a bunch of these sort of quick hitters. But this is going to be a 2-week case, and it absolutely deserves 2 weeks. It may deserve more than that, but it definitely deserves 2.
This is a good case. I mean, a good case in that I am hopeful. And I hope more people who hear this, if you are content creators, cover this case because I'm hopeful that we can get somewhere with this case. It is solvable. It is absolutely solvable.
And last thing I want to say, we mentioned this earlier, but Brianna's father has started a 501c3 called PIs for the Missing. And they actually do all cases except Brianna's. He funds all the investigation into Brianna's case on his own. But if you want to basically give money so that other families who have missing family members or some sort of mystery in their life can hire people who can look into these cases, There's several PIs working on Brianna's case, but this is for other people. Tim and Lance from Missing and Crawlspace, both great. If you're not listening to this podcast, great podcast. They're actually on the board, PIs for the Missing. We made a donation. I hope you guys will make a donation as well. It's definitely a worthy cause, and it is tax deductible. We'll have that link on the website, Prosecutors Podcast. We'll probably put the link in the show notes as well. So give money to that, because one thing, whatever happened to Brianna, whether we ever know or not, one way to honor her and to remember her is to help other families find closure and to find answers in their own cases. And that's what this organization tries to do. All right, Alice, do you have anything else before we sign off?
I do not, but I hope you guys come join us next time as we keep talking about Brianna's case.
Yeah, and we will be back next time. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. You know, I got this old drafty house, so it's hard to keep it cold. It's just hot all the time.
Yeah.
And my wife is like, turn off the fan, it's too cold. I'm like, it's 100 degrees outside. Like,
I never had, like, growing up, we didn't keep the fan on all the time. Maybe it's like an immigrant mindset that, like, anything on costs electricity, even though, like, actually fans lower your bills because it makes you feel cooler. Anyways, whatever the reason, I've never turned on a fan growing up. And it wasn't until I moved to, like, the South that I was like, gotta have the fan on all the time, even if you have air conditioning. The window, so I opened the door to let our babysitter out, and like we know this happens, that we get attacked by bugs. So I like cracked the door open. I was like, good luck, and kind of pushed her out, and then as I said good luck, a bug like slammed right into the back of my throat.
That's why you don't even talk. You just throw them out and slam the door.
Just like poor teenage girl.
Yeah.
It's like, thanks for coming by.
Bye.
Dive into true crime on Pluto TV. Unravel the mysteries with Forensic Files and 48 Hours. Investigate crimes with Dateline 24/7 and Unsolved Mysteries. With thousands of free crime movies and TV shows, Pluto TV is the true home of crime. Download the Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming true crime on live channels and on demand. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.